Hey, my friends, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and I want to say thank you again for making the time to bum around with me and do this kind of stuff. This has been incredibly cool that you carve out time to do this every day, and I absolutely love that we get to do it, so thank you. Every now and then, we talk about internet culture, and I know that that can feel patronizing for those of you who were born and nurtured in the internet. You swim in these waters, you know the lingo, you keep up with it. But I also know that it can be really overwhelming for those of you who don't swim in those waters. And so whenever we talk about internet culture, I want to take a minute to explain these things so that we're all on the same page moving forward. And here we have an internet culture thing that I think super applies to what we're talking about today. So we're talking about memes in particular. This is like any kind of imitatable, repeatable little pattern for a joke or a jab. It can be text-based. It can be a little picture, an image, a GIF, a little moving image, whatever. It doesn't matter. In this case, I'm talking about a text-based meme that I guess you would call the literally nobody meme. And the way this one works is you just got some text and it says something like this: literally nobody, and then there's a colon, and then after the colon, it says nothing. So the idea here is you're communicating that nobody said anything. And then right below that, you've got whoever is going to be the butt of the joke, and then a colon. And then they say something that is completely unprompted that apparently they just needed everybody to know because of their own quirks, but nobody really asked them. So if you wanted to jab at a vegan, I've seen this one a few times, the meme would go like this and be like, literally nobody, colon, nothing, nobody said anything. Vegans, colon, I'm a vegan. Like, oh, okay, I get it. So the joke is that vegans will always let you know that you're a vegan. I have seen them about CrossFit. Literally nobody. CrossFitters. I do CrossFit. Okay, great, cool. Literally nobody, colon, cloth diaperers. I cloth diaper. There's just another way to jab people on the internet. I mean, compared to other ways to jab people on the internet, this is probably a little bit more innocuous. I'm not saying it's brilliant. I'm just saying it's out there. And it does ring true. I mean, it describes a phenomenon that you see when you got people who are just bursting to tell you this thing about themselves that they're really proud of or excited about. And so anyway, you get it. And I bring this up because we're in Matthew chapter 14 right now. We're lingering here at the end of the chapter, and we've been circling around this claim of deity, this ascent to deity, this confession of the deity of Christ that the disciples make out in the boat after they see Jesus walking across the water. He comes toward the boat. Peter gets out and walks on water for a minute, and they all get back in the boat, and the wind settles down, and they're like, all right, okay, we've seen enough. We get it. You are the Son of God, and they worship him. So they ascribe to him deity through a physical act of demonstrative worship, whatever that was, and they confess, truly, you are the Son of God out loud. And Jesus, very notably, is not like, okay, hold on, guys, that's a little bit much. I know that was very, very cool, but Son of God, like, that's kind of blasphemy if you're wrong. No, he just sits there and takes it. Interesting. But the Son of God thing in the Gospels, though it is very pronounced, Jesus never really started it. We see the terms Son of David ascribed to him. That very much keeps with the Matthean theme of the kingness of Jesus and his right to rule, that he is the promised king who would come and reign on the throne of David forever and restore everything, straighten everything out. So we see that Son of David thing. We see the Son of Man thing, and we've looked at the Old Testament roots of that in several episodes here recently, and Jesus uses that language about himself a lot. But in terms of the claims about Jesus being the Son of God, that functions more like the literally nobody meme. I mean, when we first hear that title, that phrase, or are introduced to the concept in the book of Matthew, the first two times that we hear it are from supernatural beings, not really people. The first occurrence is the end of Matthew chapter 3 from God the Father himself, and this corresponds with Luke chapter 3. But a voice shows up from heaven at Jesus' baptism and says, "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." Now, sometimes you will hear this argument on the internet that the Bible doesn't really say Jesus is the Son of God, or Jesus didn't ever really say it himself. That's more the argument, I suppose. And over the course of this conversation we're having here today, I want to push back on that a little bit. No, not a little bit, a lot. Because I think what we're going to see as we look at this objectively together is that whether you think there's a God, whether you think Jesus is deity, whether you think any of this rings true or not, just objectively in the text, the criticism common on the internet that Jesus didn't claim to be the Son of God it just doesn't hold up against scrutiny. Now, the reality is that, as always, my friends, you are welcome to take or leave whatever is in here. I'm trying to be objective about it and think really hard about it and honestly about it with eyes wide open, faith or not faith, as I go through it myself as well. So by all means, I mean, by downloading a podcast, you have not signed up for a lifelong commitment to a religion. We're thinking about something here, but we're also committed to each other to try to think about it objectively. So if this is something that we come away from looking at the book of Matthew and we're like, yeah, I'm going to do that, it's with eyes wide open because we know what the thing actually says and we've busted our butts to try to get a good understanding of what it actually means. And if we get done with this and we're like, yeah, I'm out. I don't know. It was good. It was interesting. It's fascinating to learn what other people think, but I don't buy it. I'm not going to do it. Okay, well, we want that to be eyes wide open as well, and we'll all land where we land, and we'll be fine and get along great. So with those agreed upon ground rules, I suppose it's pretty important for us to determine whether or not he said this. Well, if God shows up and is like, hey, that's my son, like there's a voice from heaven that says that, and Jesus isn't the Son of God, or that is news to him, then that would be a great time for him to raise some questions or objections. But that isn't what happens. God calls him his son, and Jesus is like, yep. And I know that it's possible to try to make the counter move here that, well, like, isn't everybody a son of God, though? Like, Jesus is one of many sons of God. I mean, we're all children of God. But then why didn't God show up and do this at everybody's baptism? This seems like what we're learning about here is a very exclusive, unique sonship relationship that is maybe different from the more metaphorical sonship that we read about in the relationship between everybody else and God. The next person we hear use this language, son of God, is the devil, and it's in the temptation in Matthew chapter 4. And so here we are, 4 chapters into a book that is dedicated to pointing you toward the authority, the deity, the kingship of Jesus, that is dedicated to pointing the reader toward the unique father and son relationship between the two. And Jesus still hasn't been like, oh yeah, I'm the Son of God, like, an Iron Man moment at the end of Iron Man 1, I am Iron Man. He's not doing any of that. It's literally nobody, and then God, yeah, that's my son. And then we flip over into chapter 4 once again. And what does the devil lead with? Hey, if you're the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread. And then a minute later, hey, if you're the Son of God, throw yourself down from on top of this great big building. Literally no one, devil. So you're the Son of God? That's what you're saying? Well, if you're that, then do this. It's so weird and insecure the way it comes off. Like, where'd you hear that, devil? It's like one of those lame payoff moments at the end of a bad 44-minute TV show, or they're figuring out a crime and somebody's like, well, we'd need to check the trunk. And somebody else is like, I never said anything about the trunk. It was that guy. Arrest him. Like, why are you saying he's the Son of God? Apparently you heard some kind of celestial rumor that he actually is the Son of God. And then you go beyond that a few chapters, and any suggestion that Jesus is not claiming a unique father and son relationship between himself and God just is obliterated in Matthew chapter 11. And we've been over this passage already several episodes back, but I mean, listen to this thing. At that time, Jesus said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you've hidden all these things from the wise and learned and revealed them to the little children. That was verse 25. Now we'll keep going, 26. Yes, Father, for this was your good pleasure. All things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows of the Son except the Father, and no one knows of the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. All right, look, Son of God might not come up there in a Google search with quotes, but I mean, listen to what he's saying. You're smart. You can read. He's clearly making this exact claim. You flip over to John chapter 10, and you get probably the most overt claim to this. Some people want to stone him for blasphemy, for saying that he's the Son of God. And he says a bunch of stuff. And then he says, why then do you accuse me of blasphemy? Because I said, I am God's son. Like, at this moment, if Jesus wants to not get murdered with rocks, and he's really not that committed to the whole Son of God thing, and it's being inflicted on him by outsiders, a great way to get around this getting hit with rocks until he's dead scenario would just be like, I didn't say that. Other people said that about me. Whatever. Maybe hit them with rocks. I didn't do it. Why are you guys throwing rocks at me? It was ridiculous. But instead, he's like, no, yeah, I said that. But that's interesting then, because that raises another question. Well, if he acknowledges here in John chapter 10 that he did say, I am God's son, he doesn't say, I am the Son of God, I am God's son. Well, why doesn't he just say it all the time? Why doesn't he throw that title around willy-nilly like he does Son of Man and the other stuff? I think there's a good reason for that we are going to get to see firsthand in just a couple of chapters here over in Matthew chapter 16. And this flows out of that passage I just read you from Matthew chapter 11, where Jesus is like, you're the Father and I'm the Son, and you've seen one, you've seen the other, and thank you for opening eyes and revealing this stuff and giving these people to me. That's what unfolds in Matthew 16. So spoiler alert, in a couple chapters here, Peter is going to acknowledge and profess Jesus as the Christ, the Son of the living God. And so they're on a bit of a road trip, and Jesus says, who do the people say the Son of Man is? Talking about himself. And the disciples reply, yeah, some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. And Jesus is like, what about you? Who do you say I am? And Simon Peter answers, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus replied, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man. So again, Jesus is affirming it. Yep, you're dead on. And when you get to that conversation and you look back on the previous 15 and a half chapters, you're like, you know what? Jesus never really did tell them that he was the Son of God. He talked about this relationship between he and the Father. He brought him right up to the brink. He's like, you've seen the one, you've seen the other. Are you guys getting it? But they don't want to be blasphemers. They're trying to follow God, and they know Jesus is connected with God, and they don't want to say something stupid and be like, what? No! Oh my goodness, guys, you can't say stuff like that. What are you doing? So they're a little bit on pins and needles. Jesus is in the seat of authority, and they're trying to figure it out. And eventually they do, without being told, without being manipulated. And this furthers the theme, as uncomfortable as it might make us, that God is the one who initiates this stuff, that God is the one who makes this truth evident. And Jesus himself confirms that it is indeed God who has made this truth that Jesus is the Son of God evident to Peter. So it's kind of interesting to go to the 10,000-foot view and realize that this really does follow the pattern of that meme. Nobody except spiritual entities is like, oh, you're the Son of God. But then it just becomes so evident that he is, as Jesus describes his unique relationship with the Father. Other people come to the conclusion. I guess some Roman soldiers like, oh, surely that guy was the Son of God. Maybe you should have crucified him. That was maybe dumb. You got John figuring it out and saying, I could have written down a ton more, but I wrote down this much stuff, so there'd be enough evidence that you would believe that Jesus is the Son of God. It comes into focus for everyone because it is an eternal, rational, abstract truth of a reality even greater than the physical world, and people who are paying attention can't help but see it as God opens their eyes to it. So yeah, the Son of God thing, it's in there, and it's kind of a big deal. Quick note, we got our little books ordered, and those are on the way to me, which means they are about to be on the way to you, so keep an eye out for that if you are a patron of the program. If you are not a patron of the program, I would like to give you this. It's a high five because I appreciate you too. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.